evening, everybody. Welcome to the book club. Now, we are always so happy that we can actually get the author of a book to come and speak to us. So, this is one of those special occasions when we have the author. Now, Arefa Tehsin has written many books. She has published a lot. I would call her a prolific writer. And we have had the privilege of having her on the book club platform once before, about 3 years ago. And I remember that was a very, very interesting and friendly and, shall we say, productive kind of a conversation that we had that time. And I'm sure this time is going to be just as good. So we're very happy to have you, Arefa. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Hmm? And Sheena Shahani is going to be in conversation with Arefa. So I would like to now hand over the mic to Sheena, and I'm going to mute myself.
Good evening, everyone. Today it gives me great pleasure to welcome back to our forum the renowned author Arefa Tehsin. A prolific writer, Arefa has 19 fiction and non-fiction books, both for children and adults, under her belt, and contributes columns, features, and travel articles to various publications like the Condé Nast Traveler, the Indian Express, the Hindu, the Deccan Herald, and others. The daughter of renowned naturalist Dr. Reza Tehsin, Arefa has spent her childhood treading jungles with her father, exploring caves and handling snakes. She was appointed as the honorary wildlife warden of Udaipur district and has pursued nature conservation through her writing and columns. The Witch in the Peepul Tree, which she will talk to us about today, is her first novel for adult readers and has been shortlisted for the Asian Prize for Fiction. She will tell us more about this and about her future projects. The book is explorative of partition history and the socio-economic schisms of 1950s India. Privilege and power, caste and control come under her scanner while grappling with the hook of the murder mystery. In Arefa's words, it is more a social commentary than a crime novel. We come across rajas and republicans, the real and the occult, ugliness and aesthetics, prejudice and empowerment in this taut and haunting read. A fascinating cast of characters is held up for scrutiny, as we saw in the video at the beginning. Arefa's aim has always been to create empathy with and affinity for her characters, and for me, she has done exactly that with this book. Arefa spends time traveling back and forth between India and Sri Lanka. She is currently speaking to us from her home in an island colony in Colombo, where her rustic cottage is flanked by a lake. Surrounded by flora and fauna, it is the perfect habitat for inspiration. Thank you for joining us this evening, Arefa. Let me start by asking you about the selection and significance of the title, The Witch in the Peepul Tree. You mentioned to me when we spoke earlier that the witch, the Jivati Dakan, is a common bogeyman in North Indian villages. Wherever there is a peepul tree, it is popular belief that there will be a resident witch. It is also a metaphorical title for the time that the novel is set in, a newly independent country embarking into the second half of the 20th century. Please, could you describe this metaphor for us?
Sure, Sheena. First of all, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And it was a pleasure to speak to you yesterday and to understand that you understood the novel so well. Now, regarding the title, The Witch in the Peepul Tree, as you correctly said, it is a very common urban and rural legend in India, especially in northern India, and more so in Rajasthan. So wherever there is a peepul tree, people think that there is a witch in it, a witch lives in it. There is no other story, in extension to that, that the witch harms the people or so on and so forth. She just lives there. In Rajasthan, she's called Jeevti Dakan, which translates to a living witch. So I kind of build on that legend, and you have used it as a metaphor for this book. Because when you look at the Indian social milieu, the culture, the society, the beliefs that were prevalent in 1950 are still relevant today, many of them. And if you look at our Indian tehzeeb, our Indian culture, it is so disparate, and at the same time, it is highly syncretic. So the only way to simplify it is through a story, and that is what I have tried to do. And I have also tried to bring out how the oppressed can also be an oppressor, and how we are a sum total of the choices that we make in our lives. And at the same time, sometimes we can be a victim of our choices. And when you talk about this legend, this Jeevti Dakan, the witch in the peepul tree, it is a metaphor for the baggage that we all carry throughout our lives, be it of caste or gender or social conformity, which, like the Jeevti Dakan, only exists in our collective imagination.
Well said. And that brings me to the next question. You wrote The Witch in the Peepul Tree mostly during the COVID lockdown, I read. Yeah. Tell us about this time and the research required in writing a period novel, and specifically a novel set in rural northern post-partition India. You were not even born then. How long did it all take?
Actually, I was ridiculously happy during the first lockdown. Writing for me, it completely suits my solitary nature. And I was very happy being stuck in this small island colony where we live, with a lot of critters around, be it crocodiles or monitor lizards or, dozens of fireflies in our garden at night. And the biggest cherry in the pie was Aditya being around at home all the time. Aditya is my partner. So we had an excellent time, 3 or 4 months during the first lockdown. And that is when I started writing this novel. I was in the perfect state of mind. And I started researching on it when I realized that there is not a lot of literature available for this particular era in Indian history, especially in southern Rajasthan, in the kingdom of Mewar. In fact, Tarun Saint, he is somebody who extensively reads the Indian partition literature. He wrote to me after the book came out, and he told me that maybe this book is the first of its kind, which kind of, explains the history of the region, although through fiction, and records the history of that region at that particular time, the culture, the traditions, and so on and so forth. So what I did was, I actually picked into the family memory, of my family. And they were a repository of knowledge. I spoke to my uncles and aunts, and especially my uncle Riaz Tehsin, who has been, he was a quite well-known educationist and a veteran of folk arts and culture. And he was an institution in himself. He headed several institutions like Vidya Bhavan Society, which is a group of 17 institutions in an honorary capacity for many, many years. Bharatiya Lok Kala Mandal, which was at some point of time headed by Prithviraj Kapoor, which kind of, promotes the folk arts and culture. and Sahitya Natya Academy of Jaipur and many others. So I actually picked on his memory a lot, and I got a lot of information from him. And that is how I kind of, came about to writing this novel. And it was a very fulfilling time for me, both to understand my own family history and the history of the region, and to write this novel. So it was really fulfilling and enjoyable time for me.
Which in the Peepul Tree makes use of a lot of native dialect and terms, both in the narrative and in dialogue, to invoke the flavor and feel of situations and moods. Tell us about the importance of the use of vernacular in this novel, and also the feedback from your foreign readers about this technique.
Yes, Sheena. So I have created this world. It is a make believe world, but I have created it brick by brick to give the readers the most truthful version of the story. And I have done a lot of research around it. It couldn't have been complete if I had not used the vernacular to give the feel of that era. And as you said, as we discussed yesterday as well, a lot of foreign readers from Sweden, Finland, and many other places. In fact, the book, as you said, has been shortlisted for the Asian Prize for Fiction. And those people conducted book club discussions in 23 book clubs all over the world. And they all were quite appreciative. At least the readers who wrote to me have been quite appreciative of the use of the vernacular in the book, because they say it adds a lot of charm to it. And I have tried to actually explain the terms at least once in the book, wherever I have used a vernacular term. But I have not done it again and again, because I want the readers also to take a bit of effort in reading it. And in fact, I have read many other books like, Shehan, whom I'm in touch with, Shehan, who has written the Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. He has used a lot of Sinhalese in his book. And I'm based in Sri Lanka. I understand a bit of the language, but there were so many parts which I couldn't understand. But as a reader, I understood the gist of the book. And that's what matters, I think. So yeah, I have had very encouraging feedback, so I think it worked. My use of the vernacular.
It sure did. So, which in the Peepul Tree seems more of a social commentary on the time and less a murder mystery, as you yourself said. About the time period, why did you specifically choose the 14th of January 1950 for all the action, and why the Makar Sankranti festival, and why this particular part of Rajasthan, the walled city of Udaipur?
Yeah. So actually, Sheena, talking about it being a murder mystery or not, or what kind of genre it is, it sure is a murder mystery, because obviously that is the basic premise of the book. But when I started writing, I wanted to write a story which is deeply rooted in the Indian society. And I wanted to write about the existential crisis of the ordinary Indian. I wanted to write about the insurmountable odds that the lower castes face in India. I wanted to write about the desperate state of the rural India. And I wanted to write it all not as a tedious write, but as something which is, which does not tire the reader. And hence I chose this, the backdrop of a mystery. I feel, I wanted to bring out, life, all our lives are a complex interplay of interconnectedness and individuality. And under this complexity, you have the human relations that form the pattern of any society. So that was my idea about writing this book. And I actually, as a writer, I do not believe in binaries or borders of genres, especially. When it comes to my writing, I like to believe that I inhabit a lawless landscape a no man's land where there are no rules. The good thing is that I never learned how to write. So, for an autodidact like me, the unwritten commandment is that there is no unwritten commandment.
Okay.
So that is how I wrote this book. I just started with writing it, and I wanted to mix the form and genre and everything in the process. And as you asked why, I think you asked why Makar Sankranti and why Udaipur. So Makar Sankranti, I think it came from my subconscious. If I really have to say why it just came to me, but it might have come to me because Makar Sankranti is such a cultural thing in India. It is much more cultural than it is religious. Everybody goes out and flies kites, everybody enjoys the festival. And it used to be a big festival in Udaipur in those days. And even when I was growing up in my childhood, I saw how big a festival Makar Sankranti was. So maybe that is the reason I chose Makar Sankranti as the day when I based the novel. And why Udaipur is because my love for Udaipur is native love. Like my great grandfather loved Udaipur, like my grandfather did, like my father did, like my uncles and aunts did, so do I. So obviously, when I wrote my first novel for adults, it had to be based in Udaipur.
You also mentioned that the Haveli in the book is modeled on your ancestral home. Could you tell us something about that?
Yeah, sure. The Haveli or the mansion there is, loosely based on my grandfather's house and my grandfather and grandmother's residence in Udaipur, which used to be the second, I think, tallest building in Udaipur after the Maharana's Palace. And even when Dadaji was trying to make the uppermost floor, then Maharana called him and he said, "Ke tehsin, tu mere se bhi unchi building banayega kya?" So he cut it at, like 4 floors or whatever. And also the characters of Tahir and Mena in the book, who are the parents of Sanaz, are loosely based on my grandfather and grandmother. So my grandfather, he had the monopoly of arms and ammunition business in the pre-independence era. And he had, in a very McDonald's style, gone all over Mewar and opened 98 franchisee shops of his AK Tehsin and Sons. And his car was Overland Whippet at that time because the clearance was very good of the car. And most of the places he went to had never seen a car in their lives before. And after that, he had a B model car and a T model car, a Ford, in fact. And these Ford models, again, the Maharana called him and he said that, because the cars were very rare in those days. And if a car was passing through the walled city of Udaipur, people would get on the side and they would lie down on the road to pay their respects because they thought it was the Maharana who had come out. So then Maharana Bhupal Singh ji was my grandfather and him were close. And he said that Tehsin, tu apni gaadi mein se bhompu nikal de. Bhompu is basically the horn. He said, at least that will differentiate your cars from mine. So he removed the bhompu. And after independence, in fact, he had got, so many offers from the newly created Pakistan from his friends who wanted him to come there. And he was even offered a share in a fleet of merchant navy, a diamond mining. I think it was diamond mining, but yeah, some kind of mining and so on and so forth. Huge shares, but he refused to leave his motherland and his Rajput brothers and his tribal brothers and sisters. And, even if he died penniless in India, he said, I will not, leave my motherland. And that's what happened after independence. Although he knew the chief minister, the then chief minister of Rajasthan and all that, they did not trust a Muslim with an arms and ammunition business. So they took his license away. And after that, he was the pioneer of mining in Rajasthan. He had taken around 8 mines on a 100-year lease from the government of Rajasthan. And each mines in those days was around 40 miles long. So most of the areas in the Aravallis was under him, and there were a lot of tribals who worked for him. And in the later years, of course, he started running into heavy losses because they could not transport the mined material from the mines to the railheads because there were no roads then. and they could not sell the material. So they had to, again, in the 1960s or 70s, they had to surrender all the mines back to the government. But he was later on the mayor of Udaipur as well, the acting mayor and vice mayor of Udaipur. And he did a lot of work for tribal upliftment. And so did my grandmother. She was a disabled person. She didn't have a leg. And my grandfather said that either I will marry her or I will not marry at all, because they were betrothed at birth, as you can imagine in those days. But she lost her leg at the age of 7. So his mother and sister said, "Ke tu kya langdi se shaadi karega?" So they said, you cannot marry her. But even at the age of 11, my grandfather said that either I will marry her or I will not marry at all. And in the later years, they did get married. My grandmother faced a lot of problems from her mother-in-law because they were never in favor of that marriage. But my grandfather and grandmother made a great team. And despite the financial difficulties later on, they gave back a lot to the society. My grandmother was the initiator of women's education movement in southern Rajasthan. People used to come and throw stones at our place for educating the women folk, but still she did that. And in later years, she was the vice president of All India Women's Conference of Rajasthan, of which Maharani Gayatri Devi was the president. And together they did a lot of work together. Yeah, so these characters have, of course, been, I drew a lot from real life characters when I wrote this book. Badi B, in fact, was Badi B who actually managed their house, and she was a child widow. And so on. So yeah, I have drawn a lot of inspiration from the family history.
What a fascinating account that was. My next question is on character development. Most of the characters in The Witch in the Peepul Tree come across as dark and or tormented. The only two people, according to me, who have found some semblance of peace and joy within themselves are the night soil worker Parijat and the child widowed housekeeper Badi B, whom you mentioned. Parijat, and she has arguably the most crappy, pun intended, existence despite being a mute, is undoubtedly one of the most eloquent and expressive characters in the whole novel. How did you manage to create this character and convey her feelings in such depth, especially when she's not able to speak and communicate verbally?
Thank you, Shaheen, for those kind words. I'm glad you could connect to the character. Most of the characters appear tormented because obviously this novel revolves around only one day, and it revolves around a death. And most of the characters in the novel are connected to the person who dies. So obviously they are tormented that day. And otherwise, if you look at it, Hariharan also, I think, is a happy character. In fact, he has found, something that he can work to his advantage around this death. So I would say that I think he's one of the happier characters in the book. But again, Parijat, he does not face the kind of circumstances that Parijat is facing. And through Parijat, I think I have tried to convey, not even convey, I think it just came out naturally, that happiness is intrinsic. So a happy person, a person who's inclined to be happy or positive in life, will be happy and positive despite the circumstances, however bad they get. And a person who is predisposed to being sad and negative, they will, despite the best of circumstances, always find fault with their lives. And but talking about characters, all the characters, in fact, that I wrote in the book, my uncle Rajnikant Verma, he was a socialist leader and he was also a writer. He always said that if you are writing fiction or even if you are writing fantasy, it has to ring true. So how do you do that? How do you make a character come to life which is very believable? What I did was I actually dug into my own vulnerabilities, fears, losses, happiness, and I drew inspiration from that. I did not have, I had not had, in fact, till that time, any great loss in my life. I lost my uncle Riaz Tehsin, whom I spoke about in 2021, end of 2021. But my father, who, as I said, is a very well-known wildlifer, and he, if I can put it in these words, that he has converted many people to the religion of wildlife conservation. And he spent his entire life's earnings on wildlife conservation because of the training that my grandfather and grandmother gave. The entire family always worked, in honorary capacities in whatever field they worked in. And he had three brain strokes, Shaheen, and Sheena, sorry. And he actually was not really the same person that he used to be. And it was very, very painful for me. And even now, so many times, I really wish that I can, put him back again, make him whole again, but I can't. So many days, when I would finish writing, I would have tears in my eyes. So that is where all the characters came from. In fact, when I started writing, I had not really meant it to be so character focused. But somewhere along the way, I got so, committed and involved in each character that I became that character. And I truly understood what it meant to become that character. One day I would be Rao Sahib, riding a horse from the estate and coming to Udaipur and farting on the way. The other day I would be Buddy B going up and down on my arthritic limbs, in that big mansion. Yet another day I would be the servant Ismail, trying to steal some money. So I actually faced case of skipping personalities. And that's what, and also interestingly, I actually draw a lot from Urdu poetry. So शेर व शायरी जो है वो हमारी खानदान का भी काफी हिस्सा रही है, and I always draw from it. And sometimes I feel that certain shares and shairi, they basically sum up a person's life or a person's character. For example, you asked about Parijat, and I remember this share when you talk about Parijat. मैं एक कतरा तो हूं पर मेरा अलग वजूद तो है. मैं एक कतरा हूं पर मेरा अलग वजूद तो है. हुआ करे जो समंदर मेरी तलाश में है. या फिर when I think of Sughra, then I remember these lines. हमने हर रंग में ये सराय फानी देखी. सराय फानी बेसिकली मीन्स जो सराय जो खत्म होती है, फानी का मतलब है खत्म होना. इसका मतलब है दुनिया बेसिकली. हमने हर रंग में ये सराय फानी देखी. हर चीज यहाँ की आनी जानी देखी. जो आ के न जाए वो बुढ़ापा देखा. जो जा के न आए वो जवानी देखी.
The next question, Arefa, you have already answered it, so I'll skip it. It's about your grandparents being the role model for
Okay.
of for Tahir and Meena.
Right.
Okay. Now coming to your journey. Regarding your writing journey, it has been quite a journey from children's books and the young adult, new adult genre to your first adult novel, namely The Witch in the Peepul Tree. Will you be writing more adult novels? Because now that we've got a taste of this one, we want more. Tasted blood.
That's very, very, very kind of you to say that, Sheena. Actually, my writing journey began when I was in school. And my father always used to encourage me to write. He used to write a lot because he was the one who was the initiator of wildlife conservation movement in southern Rajasthan. And how he did was with the help of the local and national media. So that is how he got the consciousness, the awareness around wildlife and nature conservation, and also a lot of research papers and so on and so forth. So when I was in school, I had already started contributing to Times of India. I had started contributing features and all to Times of India. And I remember once that it was I think I was in my 11th standard, and we had an exam essay in Hindi, which was called the Kachra Patra Ki Atmakatha. And I wrote that for the exam. And it was my Hindi teacher, Rathod madam. She really appreciated it. And she actually read it in the assembly and also in the parents teacher meeting. And that was very, very encouraging for me. So as a child, if you get that kind of encouragement from school and a teacher, it means a lot. But somehow along the way, I would write now and then, but I was really not that serious about my writing until we came to Sri Lanka. And that's when, of course, I wanted to do maybe business or, I don't know what not, when I didn't even know how to write a check. And my partner, Aditya, he always, pushed me to take my writing more seriously. In fact, he nagged me, pestered me to take it more seriously. And just to stop him pestering me, I started writing my first novel for adults, which is Iora and the Quest of Five. It is for young adults, sorry. It is a middle grade novel. It is a fantasy series based in a rainforest. And I have written 6 novels in that series. It is now being published in the US by an indie publisher in Alaska. And that was my first novel, and I didn't have a laptop at that time. I didn't have a computer. I used to take the rough pages from Aditya's office, and I would, scribble down on those pages. And once, we were home and I had Aditya's computer, I would, type it on the computer. And I wrote that novel in 3 months. And then, as you said, I tasted blood, and there was no looking back after that because I got addicted to writing. I really started to enjoy it. And then I wrote quite a few books on wildlife and environment because that is where I came from. I sort of grew up in the forests with my naturalist father. Um, but later on, and also, of course, I wanted the children to know more about wildlife. And, the children to know the names of animals and birds and insects rather than cars and celebrities. So, that was one of the reasons I was writing these books on wildlife. But then at some point of time, I thought that I need to write something very different from what I've been writing. If you keep writing in a certain genre, about a certain subject, your editors and publishers, they always want you to write in that same, space. But I wanted to write something different. So I started writing children's books on social issues. So one of the books I wrote is Gupshup Goes to Prison, which is, introducing children to the open prison concept in India. And after writing a few of those books, then I thought, I need to write something completely different than what I've been writing before. And that's when I wrote The Witch in the Peepul Tree. I wanted to explore the frontiers of the possible. And after I wrote Witch in the Peepul Tree, then I wanted to write something very different. So my second novel for adults, which is called The Tale of a Magpie Robin, it is a much faster paced book because I thought that this was more of a slow burner, The Witch in the Peepul Tree, but I wanted to write a faster paced book. So then I wrote this particular book. It basically goes back and forth. It is again a mystery. It goes back and forth between 1999 and 2019, and it is told from the perspective of 4 different women.
Oh.
And there is a mystery behind it all. So yeah, I have not sent out the novel yet, but since you asked, yes, that is my
Good
next of work.
Good to know. Uh, so The Witch in the Peepul Tree has been shortlisted for the 2024 Asian Prize for Fiction. How did it feel to be nominated for this prize and shortlisted? Has your life changed much after this, and how?
No, Sheena, the life doesn't change, of course, by being shortlisted for an award. But as you said, it does feel great to be shortlisted because this is an international award and only 6 books from all over the world have been shortlisted. And there is an African author too in that. So, yeah, it feels great and it kind of, gives some kind of validation for what you have been doing, and this being my first novel for adults. I feel great about it. Yeah.
That's good.
It is exciting indeed. And it is a very long drawn process, actually. The whole thing takes around 2 years. So they had extensive discussions in 23 book clubs all over the world around the long listed books. And those book clubs then finally, decided on these 6 books. And then again, I think this award has a very different way of going about things. And they will have a super shortlist after that, wherein they'll be selecting 3 books. And they will again have extensive discussions by different book clubs now, not those 23 which were there before. And there will be a component of voting as well, not public voting, but reader voting from different book clubs. And then there is a committee. They didn't want to take fellow authors in the committee. They said readers, they believe that readers are better judges of a book than fellow authors. So they have a committee of, I think, 11 different people from various nationality who will again be reading the book. So there are these various components, and then there'll be a super short list, and then finally there'll be, the winner. So yeah, it's a long drawn process.
Which country or organization is behind this prize?
I think it's called the Asian Group of Literature, and they are based from they're based in Luxembourg, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Finally, the last question. I mean, there are many more questions, but we don't have enough time.
Right.
Who are the writers who are key inspirations to your work, as well as your favorite currently active writers who have influenced you?
Right, Sheena. Actually, so I'll again give you a little bit of background of my childhood. So we have this family lane in Udaipur, and it's a very green lane. Our family being all nature lovers. My grandfather was a big game hunter turned conservationist and one of the earliest conservationists of India. It's a whole nature loving family, so we have not constructed much. It is a wild lane. A few TV channels also have covered it because it's sort of a lung of this part of Udaipur. And we have around 30 different varieties of fruits that grow in every season. So I would be found, on the branches of some or the other tree in every season, plucking the fruits and eating, along with the squirrels and birds. And every evening, we have this tradition of having tea together. So some of the cousins and aunts and uncles, we all get together. Now, of course, we have had a few deaths in the family, but the tradition continues. Whosoever is remaining, we just sit together, have a cup of tea, and people were from different walks of life, all involved, as I said, in voluntary services. We had, of course, our own industry to take care of, our bread and butter, so to say. We had a factory and all that, but otherwise they were from different fields. We had socialist leaders in the family. We had writers, we had judges, honorary judges of juvenile court, we had wildlife conservationists like my father, we had doctors, we had, people who have studied mythology, Indian mythology and different religions. So the discussions that we would have in the evening were never around Bollywood or any of those things. It would always be about current affairs, politics, literature, culture, so on and so forth. And we also had a library at home. So I would just, go to the library or go to the different collections that my family had of books, and I would luxuriate in the possibility of books to choose from. And unlike today, where you have, these compartments of 5.5 years to 7.25 years, these are the books that you can read. And after that, these are the books that you can read. I had no such restrictions. I would just go to maybe a cupboard in the house and just pick whichever big book, even if it was War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, I would just pick it up and start reading. If it was too much for me, then I would place that book again and read, something else. So I grew on a staple diet initially of classics, of English classics, of Hindi classics like Godan by Munshi Premchand, of Russian classics by Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. There would be, Quiet Flows the Dawn by Mikhail Sholokhov, or Mother by Ivan Turgenev, and, all these classics. And before that, of course, I was told a lot of Russian stories by my father at bedtime because, there was an influx of Russian literature in those days because of the Cold War or whatever. But they were very interesting stories. And I also found the culture of Russia to be very similar to the culture of India, unlike the Western classics that I read, which were always very happy and, whatever. The Russian classes reflected more of the Indian reality as well. And Khalil Gibran was one of my favorite authors. I have read the entire works of Khalil Gibran. so on and so on. And I think all the writers that I have read till date have influenced me in some way or the other. So I can't really pinpoint and say that, this is where it all began, or this is my biggest influence in writing. But I like quite a few of contemporary authors as well. And one of them is, of course, Arundhati Roy, The God of Small Things. As I wrote in my second novel, The God of Small Things is a God of Small Things. So I really love that book, yes.
That's great, Arefa. Thank you so much for your time and throwing so much light on your book, your life, and it's very fascinating. Uh, I think we now
Uh,
open the
Pleasure
floor
is
can I
for
all
can I
mine,
can
and
I
thank you
can
for
I ask a
such a
question?
good questions and interview. Thank you.
Good question.
thank you.
My first thing is, you've written so many characters are there in your book, and each will be different. To balance them must have been a quite different task, because you must be talking to yourself, and you're talking to one person and then the other person. To get them to balance, is it difficult or it's easy? How do you do it?
Satish, it was a lot of fun, I will tell you. It was, as I said earlier, because I would become that character. So it was not at all difficult for me to think as that character. And in fact, one of the readers, she recently wrote to me. She is a writer herself, a very acclaimed
Mhm.
writer, and she is an analyst of literature. And she said that she's foxed. That is the word she used. She first, of course, wrote that how brilliant the book is and how different the characters are. And she said that by reading the book, I cannot make out what the gender of the writer is, because it is so difficult. And she said she couldn't get her head around that. I have written this book. I said, believe me, I've written this book.
that
And
that takes a lot of doing, to keep the characters separate, and their reaction, A with B and B with A, are very, very different. And you have to think, walk. I tend to walk up and down and talk to myself in that. Okay, I want to pick up another one. I love the name of, what's the name you've given? Uh, Parijat.
yes.
This people woman, you've given her a beautiful name for what work she is doing. And I thought that it was good, as people understood why you are given that.
No, Satish, so there are so many layers to this book. I think, I don't know if you agree or not, but there are certain readers who understand certain things, and there are other readers who understand other things. So I'm really glad that you picked up this point about me naming her after the Parijat flower.
Hmm.
Uh, we used to have this tree at home, we still have. And some mornings when you would wake up, there is this whole chadar of white flowers on the ground, and we pick them up and put in a bowl, so that you
Yes,
get this
yes,
very nice fragrance.
yes,
So
Parijat, yes.
yeah, so
I've also grown in North India, where we have this Parijat trees there. And
right.
last thing I wanted to say, I read something from Hemingway. There are two
Hmm.
kinds of stories: the ones you live and the ones you make up, and no one can tell the difference. You get the picture? It's very,
Yes.
very important. It's your story coming up, and what you are making up a story, or how to combine these to become very, very. It's good fun.
Yes, it is fun, and I think that by the time I finish it, um, the story exists for me. So then I also can't really differentiate that if it's a make believe thing, or this is what was there and this is what I created.
And everything coming on one day is, wow, very, very difficult.
I also felt that
Thank
the way
you.
you have arranged the storyline, you know, makes up a great deal of the attraction of the novel, let's say. You haven't written it chronologically. You've, it's morning and then afternoon and then etc. etc. And the last part is in fact before, right?
Yes.
Before.
Right.
So I thought that strategy of narration has been very successful.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
really very heartening to hear.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
that I thought how smart, you know. The same story. The story, of course, is excellent. The characters are, but if you had just written in the mundane way, it wouldn't have been as impactful. It wouldn't have carried the suspense to that extent. I think you have maximized the suspense by using this strategy of narration. And I know, Alka, you've got your hand up. I'll just finish and over to you thereafter. Um, I thought you maintained the suspense beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohani. That was
I
the
mean,
whole point, to maintain it till the end.
yes. And, we decided, of course, we're not going to have any spoilers,
Right.
but yeah, but, brilliant maintenance of suspense. Hats
But
off.
Thank
none of us guessed the ending, I think. The ones who read it,
Yeah.
we couldn't
No,
guess
we
the
don't.
ending.
We're not saying it.
That's what
It's
all
amazing.
readers have told me without exception. They would disagree on a few other things, but they said this we didn't see coming. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
well
Alka,
done.
over to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mohini, and thank you so much, Arifa. It was a lovely book to read. I mean, I did it in about 3 days because I had to give it back to Sheena. So it was wonderful. I was reading it all the time and I couldn't put it down. A very interesting read.
thank
I
you.
actually, all the questions which Sheena had asked, some of them were what I wanted to ask anyway, so they already asked. One more question slash observation that I had was, I found that the language you've used is very earthy. Even when you're describing, say, beautiful things.
Right.
Normally, when you describe, say, a sunset, they talk about burnished gold and copper tones and things like that. What you have said is Brahma had expectorated his beetle spit in the sky, streaking it with red and orange spittle. So I mean, it was very different.
I like
And
that.
so I wanted to ask you, I mean, this really, it stuck in my head. There are lots of other examples of this, but I really
Right.
liked it because, is it because the people were of that kind, the milieu was very earthy and rural and not sophisticated, or is there any other reason why you use this kind of language?
Um, Actually, as I said, it just came to me. It's very difficult. Of course, it was earthy, and I didn't want to use the metaphors that have been, excessively used by the West anyway to
Yeah,
describe,
yeah.
if they say it's a cloudy day, it means it's a gloomy day, but it is not so for us here. I love a cloudy day. So why should I be using those metaphors which have always been used in these books?
Perfect.
I thought I should be using some, and I don't know if I said this, but I had read it somewhere that uh, non-fiction can reveal the lies, but only metaphor can reveal the truth. So
Yes. Yes.
I somehow it's I don't know how relevant it is to what you asked, but the metaphors just came to
Um,
me.
Now, by the way, Aruna Jetwani is a writer herself, a muchly published writer. So, Aruna, if you have a question, do bring it out, okay?
Before
Yes.
that, Alka, thank you for asking a very good question. And it means you have really read the book, with quite a lot
Many,
of
yeah,
observation.
many such examples, and some of them made me really giggle and laugh. And I said, okay, this is really very interesting to read. Very, very nicely done.
For this chat, Sheena and Arefa. I don't know the book, and I think I didn't get enough of the book in this conversation. I got a lot about you, you and your family, and I have to tell you that I'm quite impressed by what you have told us about your family, about their being together in a lane, keeping a familial spirit together, at the same time being very diverse in their professions, all excelling in their profession. Some of them, your grandfather, the story about your grandfather is very unique, I must say. And then about your father, also conservationist, and you learning from him. It's not something you come across every day in your life. So I'm very impressed. And the fact that they continue to live here and continue to work here. Your grandfather worked from one area and then another area and succeeded, except at the end. I am very impressed by what your family has done. And it's almost like giving you a background to write this novel.
Absolutely, Latika. Thank you for your very kind words. And that's what most people fail to understand nowadays. How people can lifelong give honorary services. People, somebody like, me, I will just go to a school and, give a class, and then I'll be talking about, to that voluntary activity that I did to one and all, and saying that this is, what I did. But I have seen a family, every one of them spend their entire lives working for the society and not expecting anything in return. In fact, after the mining business, because it didn't work, although it was very unfortunate, because as soon as my grandfather, gave back all the mines back to the government, Indira Gandhi built roads, and all these places were once again connected. But then my family started a plastic recycling industry and unit in Udaipur, and that's what gave us sustenance. But because of my grandfather and grandmother, the kind of examples they had set, all the children were, they for their entire lives worked in the social sector and did everything in an honorary capacity. And that is what gives them a lot of respect. So today, when we go to Udaipur, my grandfather was very, very idealistic. He didn't take the 100 villages that were offered to him by the Maharana at the time of independence, because they anyway had to surrender the extra land back to the government. They could not own. And many of those zamindar friends of his, he said, please, he in fact gave away his own jagir that he had. He said, I'm not going to keep it. He was a socialist by heart. So he gave up everything, but the kind of respect, the social respect that we have in the family can never match the kind of riches that we could have had, if he had done that. And my father also, I mean, the entire life we have, seen him fighting for conservation. We have had times when our home has been raided by the police because, he was fighting against the government. Initially, in all those years back, there were, even 1971, the Environment Act, it came later on. And even after that, in the 80s and all, he was fighting the government to declare so many of those areas as wildlife sanctuaries. So the government didn't know what to do. They started victimizing him. So we would have police at our home trying to, find out some kind of, thing to, anyway. But all that I have seen, and I have seen the family still, stand together and fight for the things that they believed in. And I couldn't have got a better inheritance than that in my life.
They were really ahead of their time.
Indeed, they were. I feel I'm much behind my grandmother, maybe, or whatever. Progressiveness doesn't mean wearing, modern clothes. It means being progressive by mind and thought. It doesn't necessarily need to be, I feel more, strongly about nature and wildlife and conservation than I would maybe feel about human plight. So I work on conservation. I work on, wildlife conservation, or, saving the animals, or whatever in my little way, what I can do. So whosoever, feels whichever cause that you feel strongly about, even if all of us can contribute a little bit, then it will be,
that's it. All of us need to contribute that little bit, which is not for their pockets, but for the tomorrows. That's what I believe in, and I try to propagate that.
Absolutely. And also I feel that, being such a close-knit family has really helped in this world of today, where everyone is so individualistic, to have people, who are always there with you, not just your immediate family. And I have seen what a great help it can be to have people around you at the time of crisis. And I'm very fortunate that even where I married, my husband Aditya's family, despite being in Bombay, they are based in Bombay, but they are very, very close-knit, all the uncles and aunts. And in fact, Aditya, he has a family business, and he's in fact also just finishing a course in public policy. He volunteers his time with the school and all that. And he takes his entire family on a sponsored vacation every year, like 30 people on a vacation every year, so that the family remains together and we all can, always enjoy it
together. Excellent.
Very good.
Very
good. Very good.
Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
for Arefa. Arefa, I read somewhere yesterday that one of your books is prescribed in Sri Lankan schools as a textbook. Could you tell us something about that?
Wow.
Actually, Sheena, many of my books now have been taken up, both in India and Sri Lanka, by several schools. So there, this school, LPF Academy in Sri Lanka, they have taken all my children's books, in fact, for various age groups as supplementary readers for children. And even in India, there are several schools that are using it, including this Ecole Mondiale in Bombay, and a few others. And I keep on getting emails from teachers and students now and then from different schools. Sometimes somebody from Bangalore, from Bombay, from Udaipur. I don't even know that they're using the books as their textbooks or supplementary readers. So it's really good to know, especially my books on wildlife.
Also, is there a reason why The Witch in the Peepul Tree is not yet available as a...
Yeah, I just want to tell you, Arefa, it's always interesting when one reads a book and, one doesn't know the author really. And you read the book and then you sort of want to get into the author's head to think, why did he or she write this, or what were they thinking about, or what their background was. And I know that I only do background, after I have read the book, then I would go and read up about the author and what they've done and things like that. But I'm going to do it the other way around this time. I haven't read your book. But I think this has been such an interesting insight into the person that you are, as the author, that I'm quite sure that the book will be very, very interesting, and I'm very keen on reading it. It's been such a wonderful. I'm so glad, where I enjoy this author interaction, for us to be able to get to know the author and what your thoughts are and what makes you you. And I'm sure that's what you bring to the book. So definitely looking forward to reading it, Arefa.
Thank you, Sunita. Thank you so very much. And I will look forward to knowing how you like the book.
Sanjay, we're waiting to hear from you. Anna, you too.
Yeah, hi Satish. Arefa, good morning. Thanks very much for this interaction. I
Hello.
haven't read the book, so I really can't comment on its contents. But from what I gather, it must be a fascinating book. And of course, Udaipur is. I'm partial to Udaipur. I was born there. My
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, my grandfather was the principal of the Maharana Bhupal College for a number of years.
Oh, okay.
And yes,
Wonderful to know.
and was on the campus of that college that I was actually born. So it's permanently there in my passport. So of course, a novel about Udaipur is a rare thing. I don't think there are very many books which feature Udaipur as a city. So I would love to read it. I'm sure I'll get it and read it. But one thing I wanted to ask you is about the writing process. Is it that you think through the story and then you get down to the business of writing, fleshing out the plot, etc.? Or is it that you have some rough idea, you have some characters in mind, and you start, and then the story takes a life of its own and arrives at and then you have it all in one place? How does it work?
First of all, Sanjay, I'm glad to meet a fellow Udaipurite here. And yes, there aren't very many books on Udaipur. Even now, if you look at, forget about that era, even now today in the present context, you hardly have much of, literature that you can refer to, unless you look at the tomb, that huge tomb, which is the history of Mewar, written by there's a very detailed history of Mewar.
Yeah, that's Colonel Todd, isn't it?
No. It's an Indian author. I will remember the name.
If I may just interject here, there is Rama Mehta's novel Inside the Haveli.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Which
Rama
is
Mehta's, I'm sorry, I forgot that. In fact, they are very close family friends of ours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Rama Mehta is the wife of Jagat Mehta. Jagat uncle was the Foreign Secretary of India. He was a diplomat. He was a Foreign Secretary of India during Vajpayee's time. And he was, his father, Mohan Singh Mehta, had formed Vidya Bhavan Society, of which he was a president. And then later on, for 10 years, my uncle Riaz Tehsin was the president. So Jagat uncle, in fact, has written even a prologue for the Seed of Jungle God, which I spoke about when I came to Canada. So yeah, Rama Mehta's book is also quite fascinating. You are absolutely right. I'm sorry I missed that. But there is hardly any other literature. And talking about the writing process, Sanjay, I do always have a rough story in mind before I begin, and also the characters. What they will be before I begin writing, and then I get, as I said, I get too involved in it. And if the characters take me on a different route than what I had initially imagined, I let them do that. But more or less, the larger structure, I kind of stick to.
I see.
Uh,
Okay.
but it can change somewhat during the way, especially with this novel. As I said, I had not really meant it to be so character focused, but I got really, involved with the characters. That is why it is so character focused. But the picture that I had thought of the story and what are the issues I'm going to talk about, that remained in the entire process.
I think Wispy and Anna, two of them who are regular, and Gautam, the three of them. Anyone of if you want to say anything, Anna?
And before
Wispy?
that, one more thing: if you're planning to write a novel, it is better to have a structure and a particular end in mind. Otherwise, you will not be able to finish it. So it's better to have that structure there before you begin writing.
Anna, you're on now.
Yeah. So first of all, it was really a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. And as a kind of propagator of English literature with young people, it's so lovely to have an author who writes books with a background that our Indian children can relate to. So that's great, and I'm going to surely use them in my various classes. I have one question, if you don't mind, because you come from a socialist background and a background of environmentalists. I haven't read the book, but somewhere along the line, somebody did say that Parijat had the character to be happy, so could be happy anywhere, anytime. That is part of a Christian ethos, which I think, but I have never actually ever read an author which has a similar opinion. Because if you look at maybe Mulkraj Anand and Perumal Murugan, who write about people who are at the bottom rung, we never ever see this. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying, do you really think that it works even at the bottom rung? So if I put it in a kind of environmentalist way, can a caged tiger, despite its its individual makeup, be happy even one day? I'm just asking this question. I don't know what the answer is.
I do think, Anna, that there are those kind of people, and they have always been around. If they were not there, then the humankind wouldn't have survived. We need people, and even, I mean, a take on Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest. If everybody, gets so depressed that they don't even work for the survival, and they don't. This is an inherent trait of human beings, that we survive. We somehow survive.
I'm asking about happiness.
Yes,
survival,
and happiness too. Happiness too. If you are too unhappy or too negative in your life, I don't know how long those kind of people can even survive. Even as a race, I don't think, I have seen the worst of things that can happen to people, like cancer, and being at a very bad stage in cancer. They have fought back somehow, and people who don't have even those kind of bad diseases, they will have something which is much less harmful or dangerous, but they will be cribbing all the time. Every time you talk to them, they will just
there I agree with you. As a kid, at my uncle's place in Talegaon, I used to watch the Night Soil Lady. And I just used to, it just destroyed me, to just watch her, and she used to come with a kid. So that's the level I'm talking about. Otherwise, yes, I fully
Absolutely, and
agree.
I also remember now these tribals that my father, would initially he was a big game hunter, and even after during his conservation drives and efforts, he's an explorer. He's known as the Vasco da Gama of that region because he has tread all those forests on foot and helped the government to design all the wildlife sanctuaries that we have there today. Because many of the forest officials in those days didn't know anything about the forests, and my father was not employed by the forest department, but he knew everything, most of the things about the forests of the region. So he would go and he would spend a lot of times with the tribals, Anna. And there are things that he told me about these tribals who lived in abject misery. And my father was, in fact, when my grandfather was running these mines, all over the Aravali hills, my father would be there for months at end in a tattered hut with no habitation for 5 square kilometers, and he would live there alone. If he didn't even know how to cook, so if he shot some, he would just have eggs 3 times a day. And if he shot some small bird or a deer or any small mammal, then on that day he would share it with the tribals, and he would have a small piece of meat because the tribals were very, very protein starved in those days. And the way they lived, he has said that he has seen people dig roots and eat and die of starvation. But he still speaks about many of them, that they were such happy people. They would sing and dance every day, especially the tribals of Panarva region. They would, even in the worst of cold, they would just sleep for 3-4 hours a day because they didn't have enough warm clothes to cover themselves. And they would, till the time the fire would last, they would sing and dance and maybe sleep for a few hours. They would get back to work again the night day, and that is in the morning, and that is how they led their lives. And he would say that if you ever visited a remote tribal home, the way they would treat you would put the kings to shame. They would give you
Wow.
the best of food to eat. They would produce a blankets from somewhere which they would never use for themselves in their lives, and they would give it to the guest to use. So, and so those are the kind of stories and things which kind of show how you can be happy even if you don't have anything in your life.
Yeah, okay, that's great. That's great.
Wispy,
Looking forward to
Wispy
reading the
has
book.
raised her hand. Wispy Bilimoria, you had raised your hand.
And no, I have to confess, A, that I haven't read the book, and B, that I had to be in and out of today's talk because there were some workmen in the house, so I kept getting called away. But whatever I've heard, Arefa, I am most impressed with all that you have said, and particularly this last bit about the tribals. I think it's a lesson to those of us who live more comfortable lives to see how one can live with some sense of satisfaction despite having zero in the sense of what we who are used to more materialistic sort of lives depend on and moan about, oh, I don't have this or that. So I think one can take a lesson from them. And it was whatever, I'm sorry that I had to miss, because of whatever was happening in the house, but I kept coming in and appreciating what you were telling us and about your family background. And I love this idea of the family meetings, even over a cup of tea. This sort of togetherness, I think, is very necessary.
Okay, the last two, I think, Gautam and Runa.
Yeah, even I need to push off now.
Yeah, Gautam and Reena.
Oh, well, I just wanted to refer that you did mention about your second novel, your writing or coming out with it. But before that, I assumed that you would write the fascinating story of the three generations of your family, which is, it seems to be, would be very interesting. And
thank you, Gautam. As a matter of fact, Penguin wants me to write a children's book on my grandfather. So let's see. Yeah.
Okay. No, from the point of view of the generation and the conservation and the entire family history, that would be also very interesting. That would be the, yeah. And Of course, I thought the novel's title could have been Witches and People. The people are horrible people. So.
Right. That's a good one.
It's our friend Gautam. He has to toss a googly every day there. So that's his googly. I was waiting for that.
Runa?
Oh, all that I've heard today makes me eager to read the book, which I'm going to get very shortly.
I want to read it again once more. And because I did read it very, very quickly.
Yes,
Yeah.
I feel the same way. That, it always happens that you're piecing, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? A whodunit. You're piecing together evidence and material as you get it. And you want to go back and see how to redo it.
Yeah, and what were the clues that were there earlier on?
Exactly. Yeah, that you didn't catch on to and so on. Yeah. Okay, so Sheena, would you like to round off everything? Because I think Arefa also needs to leave.
Yeah, thank you, Arefa, for taking the time to finally come, because we have been waiting for you to come and talk about your novel. And I think since December, when Mo got a copy of your novel, and she said, Arefa Tehsin is going to be coming to speak to us. And at least I have been waiting, because author interactions are always so exciting. And thank you for finally making time and coming and giving us so many insights into your family and generations and things that make you tick and things that you love doing. And for somebody who's read the book, I saw the similarities between your family members and some of the characters in the book. So guys, you must read this book, after this interaction. I wholly recommend it. So thank you everyone for coming. We had quite a good turnout. We had at one point of time, we had 23 participants, 24 participants. Yeah, so including the author, right? That's 20.
Yes.
24, but yeah, so that was great actually for us. And so thank you so much, because everybody's busy on a Sunday evening. Even you said you have to go somewhere. So thank you so much, Arefa. Thank you, Moini.
Thank you so much, Sheena. It was indeed such a pleasure to come here again at Gyanadab and speak to all of you, and especially some of you who have already read the book. And I had a great conversation with Sheena yesterday as well, as I said. So thanks again, Mohini, Satish, and all of you. I hope those who haven't read the book will maybe like it. I will await to hear how you all like the book after reading it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Arefa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know everyone enjoyed the session very much.
Yeah.
We look forward to having you again with another novel quite soon. Thank you.
And all the best for winning the prize, okay?
Yes,
Yes.
indeed.
We'll be cheering you.
Yes,
Don't
we're
worry.
in your corner. Thank you so much.
Thank
Our
you.
next meeting is on the 18th of August.